the power to see things. There's just things I can see that I can't explain. My mom kicked me out when I was 18. I moved in with my aunt in her basement. Her house is relatively new. My uncle bought it when he was young. I think he bought it in the 90s or 80s. Anyways, only one lady lived in it before him, and she only lived there a year or so before she moved out. I didn't think the house was haunted. I have a phobia of ghosts. Anyway, as soon as I moved into the basement, I always had the feeling of dread. That feeling that something else is there with you that you can't see. I have had a few dreams living there where something is after me. I remember one dream specifically. Something was grabbing my leg, trying to pull me off my bed. I kicked at it and I woke up. My leg was still kicking and thrashing. I had that feeling of a hand on my ankle. You know how it lingers after someone touches you. That feeling. I was scared shitless of that basement. I would sleep with the covers over my head. It was always pitch black and cold. My bed faced the stairs. The way it was set up was 4 walls and the stairs were on the left side of the room. Once you got to the bottom of the stairs, you had to turn right and you'd be in the center of the room. Well, the only way to set up my bed was to face the stairs. I was so afraid to look in the direction of the stairs because I was afraid something would peek around the wall at me. I'm a normally happy, bubbly person. For some reason, this basement made me depressed. I'd pick fights with my then boyfriend over nothing. I moved out after 7 months and my mom and sister moved in. My sister had the same fear of the stairs. She said she saw a cow skeleton creature with a black hooded robe in her dreams, and it would just stand there and reach its long, bony human-like hands around the corner of the wall and peek its disgusting skull around and stare at her. As far as I know, she never actually saw anything there, and neither did I. But she would picture this creature when she closed her eyes. When I lived there and I was laying down to sleep, I'd have vivid, random, and quick images of monsters flash before my eyes. They were always only a split second and they were gone. Very grotesque, horrible creatures that I have never seen in books or movies, that I immediately could not describe or remember what they looked like. My mom and sister had cats that lived with them for some reason. Both cats lost a lot of weight and fur. I swore these cats were about to die. When my sister moved in with me, her cat immediately gained weight, and his fur grew back. He looks happy and healthy now.
This is my second post on here. I ghost hunted frequently as a hobby, so I have a few stories. This isn't a ghost hunting story actually, it's more of a personal experience. My cousin, who is like a brother to me, rented out his first house when we were 18 or 19. This house was about half a mile into the woods and extremely secluded. There was a gravel driveway and that was the only access point. The house was built in the early 1800s and had quite a few deaths happen on the property. In fact, there was a graveyard about 50 feet away from the house with some of the original family members, not uncommon for that time period. Well, everything was almost too good to be true at first. Half-decent house, 3 bedrooms, tons of land, cheap rent. Honestly, couldn't complain. There were 3 people living in this house at the time, not uncommon for young people to split up rent just to save a buck. Then stuff started happening. Cold spots in the middle of summer in a house with no AC, picture frames falling off the walls, orbs in pictures, etc. No one really brought it up at first, but it was kind of like an unspoken common knowledge. This is when things got really weird. You would be outside having a cigarette and you'd hear a woman scream in the woods or see what looked like a shadow person in the driveway or fields, A full face of an elderly tall man appeared in several pictures. So we sat down and talked to the owner. Apparently, that would have been her great-grandpa or something along those lines, and he had died by falling down the staircase in the farmhouse. That very night, as we were discussing it over a beer in the living room, all by itself the hand railing was ripped out of the wall. We had all been ghost hunting together many times as a hobby, but we had no experience with living with it, so we were pretty lost. A couple months later, everyone had moved out for their own separate reasons. I don't think anyone lives there right now, but that house was damn scary to the point no one slept in it by themselves.
In December 2011, I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend. I was 7 months pregnant. The apartment was one of 5 in what used to be a general store over a century ago. A few weeks before my daughter was born, my child's father and I were up late at night and talking in bed. As we talked, a horrible feeling crept over me. The air was growing heavy. It felt like something dangerous was inside the apartment, just outside our bedroom door. Mid-sentence, my child's father asked, "Do you feel like something horrible was about to happen?" He was feeling it as well. He grabbed his gun and walked around the apartment, barricaded our front door, and we fell asleep on the living room floor. Nothing happened again for a long while. At one point, I noticed a man standing in the doorway to my daughter's nursery while I was watching TV, but he disappeared as soon as we made eye contact. It wasn't very scary. At another point, I opened the door to my daughter's nursery to grab a diaper one night. Our kid ended up sleeping in our room a lot, and felt like there was something in there that I couldn't see. And a few different times, all of my daughter's electronic toys in her nursery would activate and make noise at the same time when no one was in there. I remember her rocking horse start to move one day while I was sitting on the couch. A month after my daughter's first birthday, my cat Kevin passed. I'd still feel him come and curl up on my feet at night. It was relieving, knowing that he'd still come visit me. I loved him so much. Then the growling started. The closet in our bedroom always made me uncomfortable, like something was looking at me from inside. It was at night, and the familiar weight of Kevin just settled down on my feet. I put down the book I was reading and turned off the lamp. About a minute later, a dog-like growl came from the direction of the closet. It lasted for a few seconds. I turned back on the light and saw nothing. I woke up my child's father, and he was annoyed. The next afternoon, he went into the bedroom to get headphones. He returned to the living room, sat down, and told me that he had just opened the door to our room when something growled at him. From that point on, I heard the growling at least 3 times. One time, my daughter was standing on the bed while I was getting changed. She pointed to the open closet and said, "Purple-faced man." I thought she was talking about Barney, her favorite show at the time, and brushed it off for a while. At one point, I remember seeing the shadow of a large dog with a fluffy tail walk into the bedroom while I was down the hallway. There were a handful of times that both my child's father and I would separately experience something pushing us out of the bedroom if we were trying to enter it. It was a disgusting feeling, because it didn't feel like it was pushing against our skin, but our veins. It would always make my stomach feel prickly and put the taste of blood in my mouth while giving me goosebumps. One night I was awakened to the growling. It was louder than it had ever been before. I stared out from under the covers. I pulled them over me and my child's head in fear, and could see some sort of movement, but I stopped peeking the louder it got. It was accompanied by a cat's growling, hissing, and caterwauling. There was a final wail gnawing on bone. Something shifted on the top of the covers near my feet, and then it was over. I've laid there under the blankets, silently crying in terror until morning. I peed myself, too afraid to emerge from the covers. Kevin never came to visit me again. I think that his spirit was eaten by whatever else was in that room that night. The paranormal activity in the apartment went up tenfold for the 3 weeks we remained there afterwards. Doors slammed, the chairs would roll across the carpeted floor. One picture of my daughter would keep falling off the wall. Once I entered the room and the picture was on the other side, from where it had been hung, now sitting perfectly posed on the couch. We eventually moved into our new home, but there was a period of a week where we didn't have any internet there. My child's father would return to the apartment to use his computer for his data entry job. On his last night there, he was sitting at the desk in the living room when he heard something loud sliding on the floor in our old bedroom. Then there was a loud bang and it shook the wall. All of the power in the apartment went out immediately, followed by an unmistakable sound of an animal growling. He had to walk in complete darkness past the bedroom to get to the circuit breaker just outside our front door, while the growling came from the open-doored bedroom. On the last day of our lease, I went over by myself to do a bit of cleaning. I invited our downstairs neighbor inside to talk, while we stood in my daughter's nursery. I asked if her apartment was haunted. She had a story about a man screaming at her and her boyfriend to wake up. Then she told me, "But I bet your apartment is a lot more haunted than mine. That guy killed himself in the closet in the other bedroom." As she spoke, the computer chair sitting behind her in the living room swiveled to face us. I pointed it out to her, and she said the same thing happened in her apartment too, the moving furniture. After she left, my child's father brought our child over. We let her, almost 2 at the time, run around while we talked about how we were going to take the crib apart. Suddenly, we heard our daughter scream. She ran out of our nursery. I picked her up, and we asked her what was wrong. She responded, "Shadow Man." Her father and I exchanged a look, then left. Later that night we came back to pick up the last few things in that apartment. We didn't want to take our daughter back inside, so one of us would stay in the car with her, while the other one ran to grab a box. He made the last trip. While he was leaving, the bedroom and bathroom doors were slammed repeatedly. The lights were turned on and off. He heard the sound of footsteps running behind him as he walked down the hallway and out the door. As he turned to lock up, the front door slammed shut in his face. The lock clicked. We don't like talking about the apartment in the red building at all. It's come up a few times over the past few years, and one of us will reluctantly tell a story that we never wanted to tell or remember. I couldn't be paid enough money to ever step inside that place again. There's something evil inside.
In the summer of 2006, I fell in with an interesting group of friends. They were all obsessed with the paranormal, and it had always been an interest of mine as well. One of the group had heard of a graveyard about an hour away that was nestled into a secluded patch of forest. Naturally, being young and stupid, we decided to get some flashlights and head that way. It took hours to find it. It was unmarked and hidden, down a dirt road with nothing else for miles. We parked the car and got out. There was a path leading into the woods, with the graveyard at the very end. It was small, only about 30 headstones in total, surrounded by trees and forgotten. The latest death date we could find was 1923. Once we were there, we really didn't know what to do next. So we sort of just milled around looking at headstones. It was incredibly quiet, no forest noises at all. We could hear our own breathing. Suddenly, a woman started screaming, and it sounded like it was right in our midst. At first it was just short, loud screams, but then it melted into words. We could hear her begging, screaming, "Please," and "No!" We all froze. I started to stumble backwards towards the path and the car, but two of my friends started towards the woods to look for the woman. The screams ended abruptly. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. My whole body was drenched in fierce sweat. There was a feeling of anticipation, like the static before a lightning storm. Then a gunshot rang out, making all of us scream. We took off running collectively towards the car. We jumped in and slammed the doors, and as we reversed away, the headlights caught a woman stumbling down the path. My friend yelled to stop backing up and leaned out the window, calling to the woman. He started to get out of the car, but she disappeared while we were talking to her. After that, we got the fuck out of there as fast as possible. I'd like to say we never went back and that we learned a lesson, but we went back every other weekend for almost a year. A lot weird things happened, but nothing as visceral as that terrifying first night.
My house is right next to a forest, where almost every side has a forest next to it. We only have one neighbor in our area, but they are rarely home. Since we live in such a dense forest, and the fact that I am in Norway, it is pretty much nighttime all day long. We rarely see any sunlight at all in the winter period. What is really creepy though, is that the power to our house frequently cuts out, which really isn't a surprise or a new thing, since the power goes out almost all the time. But very recently, very strange things start to occur when I am home alone. It has happened 2 times now, that when the power cuts, it's pitch black both inside and outside, and one time, it was completely dark. I was sitting in my living room on my cell phone, when I suddenly see a flash in my panorama living room window. I take a look outside and see something at the edge of the woods with a flashlight on his head, I think, looking directly in my window, maybe about 50 meters away, and he's just standing there. I'm a pretty confident guy, and not so easily scared around the woods, given that I pretty much grew up here. So I figured I should check up on this guy, since he is on our property and we really don't like people looking in our window, especially not that late at the evening. Power's still out, so I equip my flashlight and my field pants, and my hunting knife, which I always bring for various reasons. I go outside and start heading in the direction where the figure was standing. Nothing was there. I look around after it, and it has moved further in the woods. I could still see his flashlight. I start yelling at him, but I get no response. I am kind of jogging towards his position, still trying to get his attention and tell him that people really aren't supposed to walk here. The closer I get, maybe about 100 meters away from my house, and 50 meters from the figure, I realize something is off. My flashlight is lighting up the area, but it doesn't seem to light up the person. It sort of goes through him. Now, I'm not that close that I can for sure say the light doesn't illuminate him, but I stopped. This shook me to the bone. This guy casually stared in our window in the middle of a blackout, didn't react to my callouts, and neither did he walk in a normal pattern. His flashlight was almost hovering, and that's when his light just turned off. He disappeared. It was all pitch black again. The only light I could see was from my own flashlight. Still pretty shaken up, I hurry my way back to the house and find out that both the main porch to our barn was completely open, which are always closed since it is winter, and that the floodlight positioned outside was already turned on, which would indicate that the power was back. Not really comfortable with the experience I just had, I decided to go to bed with the light lit. I had pretty much forgotten about the whole thing when about a year later, about a week from now, the same shit happened again. The power was out, and again I was in my living room when I saw the same freaking flash from my window. I peeked outside and I saw the same glow in the woods opening. I then remembered the occurrence last year, and I just froze. No way am I going out there again. I locked all of the doors, got my flashlight and my knife, and locked myself in my bedroom. The power was back in a half an hour or so, and I have never been so afraid as I was that day. I'm not sure who or what the thing in the wood opening is, or why it only appears when the lights were out, but I'm not sure if I want to know either. The experience didn't make me afraid of the woods. I still roam it late at night, but I am more afraid of being inside my house when it's dark. I'd much rather be in the forest.